and it won't read it. We're having some fun here, everybody. But Paul is here, and I really would like a chance for him to tell you some of his stories. And so while we're working on the technical side on the back, I would like to go ahead and get this kicked off. And Paul can kind of do his interpretive dance and wing with us just a little bit as we work on this. But I want to thank you all for being here and being a little patient with us. My name is Cinnamon Moffat. I'm the person who helps with these usually. We've got a whole team up here working on figuring out how to get this fixed. But again, I want to thank you for being here. Everybody, this is a hybrid event, so we have folks online and folks in the room. For folks in the room, if you have any questions for Paul as we continue on, just raise your hand and I'll hand you a mic so folks online can hear. For folks online, again, thank you for being here. And if you have any questions, if you put them into the chat box, Roseanne will read them out to Paul. And typically we wait for questions at the end, but today's different. So whenever a question comes to you, feel free to ask it, raise your hand, or put it into the chat box, and we'll work through those together. Everybody, I just wanted to let you know this is our last seminar of 2024. The year has gone so incredibly quickly, but I wanted to promote next seminar, which will be on January 9th when Wick Broder will be here, and we'll be talking about our marine heat waves and pyrosome blooms, the new normal. So that'll be a really interesting one. And again, that'll be January 9th. But before I kick it off and hand the mic over to Paul, I just wanted to do a quick introduction. Many of you know Paul already. But Paul Engelmeyer's love of fishing and forest brought him to the Northwest in 1975. After working in the woods all over Region 6, that includes Oregon, Washington, and Idaho, from tree planting to tree climbing for cones, he transitioned to being part of the Oregon State's Marbled Murrelet research team. When the first murrelet nest was found in Oregon's forest in 1990, he made another shift to full-time advocacy. Paul has been incredibly busy since that shift, and I'll just list a couple of the things that he's been working on. Paul served as the Salmon Advisory Subpanel and Habitat Committee for the Pacific Fisheries Management Council, dealing with salmon management within the Pacific Northwest. He has years of experience in managing the 10 Mile Creek Sanctuary, which is located near Yachats, Oregon, for the Oregon Bird Alliance, formerly known as the Portland Audubon Society. He has served in the Oregon's OPAC, which is Oregon's Policy Advisory Council, where he advocated for the development of the systems of marine reserves and protected areas on our Oregon shores, Oregon Territorial Sea. He helped the Cape Perpetua Collective, which included federal and state agencies, as well as business partners on the Central Coast. And he's also managed lands for the Wetlands Conservancy located in Alsea, Beaver Creek, and Yucuna Bay. And he has 25 years ago, he and a few community members set up the Mid-Coast Watershed Council. And I'm about to hand it to him, but it looks like maybe we've got slides. We have slides, everybody. Woohoo! Miguel, it's amazing. All right. All right. Before we go there, we need to share that, Miguel. If you can go back to Zoom. We might have slides. Not quite yet, Miguel. I have the screen extended, so we might have to do duplicate, and then we could just play it from here. And that might be easier. Oh, the anticipation, everybody. This is great. Paul, we couldn't have asked for something better to build everything. As we're finishing up this last little bit, I'm going to hand the mic over to Paul.
Sure.
And you can tell us a little bit more about you.
Sure.
Thank you.
Now, which do I?
Oh, I'm sorry. You got it. Use the one on your chest.
Okay, who's furthest away? Can you hear me okay? Good? All right, excellent. So, yes, I fell in love with the Oregon coast. We had a great contract at Hebo District of the Sayula National Forest. I could earn my half a day wage, go steelheading in shorts, those beautiful February days, earn enough money to go on an adventure to South America, and decided I'm coming back to the Oregon coast. So that's how I got landed here. And so I've been basically put the flag in the sand. As I did that, there were other activists as well that I got to know. And so I made that transition from a worker to an organizer, hate to say, and an instigator, kind of all three of those. And when the agencies, the National Forest, SAUSLA, or ODFW, we were partners, but I would also hold them accountable if there was a flaw in management, okay? So those are things that I was doing as this opportunity to acquire a significant chunk of land that was nestled between Cummins Wilderness on the north and Rock Creek Wilderness on the south. And right place, right time. I was actually then also being an advocate invited back to DC, and I met some Auduboners back in DC, and they says, Paul, you should meet Dan Taylor in Sacramento, because Audubon has sanctuaries all over the United States, but they don't have one in Oregon. And I said, great, I'll talk to Dan. So I put my first little packet together related to protection, restoration, acquisition, right place, right time. They were on a fight that I knew nothing about. Some of you in this room may. Mono Lake, does that mean anything? And when I ask a question and I get a head nod, and if I didn't, no one does a head nod, then I have to explain it more in depth. Okay, so Mono Lake, I didn't get everybody getting the head nod correctly. That was a fight that went on for 10 years, basically to keep water in the lake for shorebirds. Audubon in California was in the middle of it. That fight, they won. All of a sudden, all those lawyers' fees came back into their pocket, right when I said I need an investment, and you will be in the middle of the most significant coastal temperate rainforest left in the lower 48. That wasn't my data, it was Conservation International data. Luck?
Yes, it's up. And
Oh,
it's here.
great. So in any event, that's how I got landed after I got them to buy it, they needed a manager. I became the manager. That was 1990. And then I've orchestrated project after project, including working with the SAUSLA National Forest and ODFW on a monitoring strategy for salmonids, a life cycle monitoring project that ODFW took on, and a restoration project with the Forest Service, SAUSLA National Forest. So I've been just totally engaged on the ground as well as policy issues at the regional scale, okay? So that's kind of it in a nutshell, and we can get started on this. How does that look in the back? Good, all right. So how do we do this? Do I just point over to do it, or do I tag it? Okay.
Or you can point to me and I can do it if you'd like.
No, I don't mind tagging it.
Right there.
Which one? Okay. Okay, that's our footprint. And how many of you have been to the top of Cape Perpetua, the scenic view? Everybody, isn't it amazing? Yeah, really good. Okay, this is what I'm so these are some of our partners, not all of them, but it's a significant number of my partners that I get to work with. And so my effort with the Mid-Coast and Surfrider, I mean, we've got dealing with upland, so it's a ridgetop to reef kind of concept. And so for us, since a handful of us started the project, and now we've been around for 25 years. And if we get to the end, I will show you our celebration document. That is a summary of what we've been doing, and I can give you the link if you're so inclined, and then you'd get to really see what we've been doing in our focal areas. And that's the footprint of the landscape. And so myself, our project at Audubon is the lower landscape unit at the bottom. So that, and the yellow one on the bottom is where Cummins Wilderness is, 10 Mile Creek, Rock Creek Wilderness. And so that's where I initiated the project. And then we got partners in the Yachts River, the Alsea River, and Newport, and got our bylaws squared away, started writing proposals, hiring crews. And we found that when we organized, now I'm jumping about 10 years ahead to get to marine reserves. Let's keep going. We organized really for coho salmon. What we realized is that that basically, if you're doing a project to improve water quality, it's linked to coho. You're doing a project to improve habitat conditions to salmon recovery, it's a coho link. So that was really our link for why we should engage. And what we found was that some of us could work with private landowners and have an in on the door. And some of those same private landowners were a little bit hesitant to work with the federal or the state, but they would work with other folks, so to speak. So when we started, there were 3 watershed groups. And quickly, that concept of having an independent group work with the states, work with the feds, and work with the community, watershed council, resonated. And it resonated all over the state. So we went from 3 in the state to now 60. And then in the region, there's ballpark is around 300. And these are groups that have a 501(c)(3) status. They write proposals, do projects that are mirroring what ODFW want to do. So ODFW is moving forward with projects. They're on our tech team. They're totally in sync with where we're headed and in our estuaries as well as in our watersheds. But that's why we really got organized. And then mirroring that is this state's conservation strategy. So then we jump forward about 10 years plus, and the ODFW put together this strategy document, and it's really good. And it breaks out the whole state into COAs. So I will use a lot of acronyms, and they just kind of roll off of my tongue. And if you go, okay, I never heard of that acronym. That's a COA. Have you heard of it? Yes or no? No, okay. Conservation Opportunity Area. Wherever, anywhere people live, they live in a COA with a list of actions. And those hatch marks are COAs with prioritization of species and projects and partnerships. So it's really a good document. And so what we're doing mirrors that. And just an example, I pulled out of the document, I just pulled up some of the COAs and some of the strategy species. And it's pretty impressive document. And it's up for review. If you looked at it now, you could give them feedback as you forgot something, but now would be a good time to engage if you're so inclined. And then as all of this is moving forward, there was this America the Beautiful initiative. And these are principles that are linked to basically a funding package. And so anybody who looks at it go, yeah, that makes sense. Yep, use the science as the guide. Yep, work with the tribes, build on, you go through the list. And so in any event, that already mirrors what we had in place. So that made it really nice. And so we're ushering in some projects under these initiatives. Nobody knows how that will play out into the future, but a good project is a good project. And so we'll see how that plays out. And so this is just one of the COAs on the north end of our landscape unit. So these are landscape conservation strategies with core areas. And that would be a COA. I can't remember off the top of my head what that COA is. And this is going to be recorded, so you don't have to memorize anything or look at the fine print. If you're so inclined, you could pull it up later and then be able to see all that. But this is at Cascade Head, which is its own COA. And it has had research in that estuary, top of the line, interagency, feds and state, Forest Service, and ODFW in the estuary. Awesome project and a great team, and it's a great story too about the value of estuaries to salmon recovery. And we had speakers from both the Fed, Forest Service, and ODFW give those talks at our Watershed Council. So that's recorded. And that would give you a feel for this life history pattern of salmon rearing in the estuary. It's really a good story because prior to that, it was like, oh, they just moved through. Well, we now know that's not quite accurate. It's really incredibly valuable, the estuary is, for increasing productivity, and it's a life history pattern. And so again, this is the estuary. And this is another example of, this is in our document, that is a handout and a celebration document. Well, since we were around 25 years, one of my interns says, Paul, who's from U of O, says, Paul, I think I can get some credit if you come up with a good idea. Let's run it by a professor and I'll do the work and then you'll have a document or something. So we says, well, we've been at it for 25 years. Let's put this celebration document together and then use that as an educational tool and a fundraising tool. It's already worked. And so we've got that, got it online. It's on our Mid-Coast Watershed Council website, and it's already generated support from donors and folks that are buy into the vision of landscape conservation, connectivity, watershed resiliency, and community engagement. And back again to the COAs. And this is a COA. Do folks recognize this? Not from this angle, probably, huh? You have driven by it on the way from Newport Bayfront to Toledo. And you're looking across the bay. Okay? Pool Slough. 10 points for Karen. I didn't tell you that. Whoever gets the most is going to get a free beer. Okay, and some of the strategy species, just as an example, a document. And I really like to tout it because it is a good document. And I hate to say it, the only flaw is hardly anybody knows about it, except for guys like me who are already engaged, but I use it as a tool. And this is another COA with the Forest Service doing a portion of the project, and a phase 2 is going to happen. This is, if you go to the left on that little oxbow there, one side to the right will go to the Alsea Bay, and the left will take you up to Upper Drift Creek, where the wilderness is. But that's a priority area. And again, these are some of those funding sources and other priority areas. This one on the bottom to the left and the restoration project on the right, that's a project that, believe it or not, see if Bruce is here. Bruce isn't here. He was on that project when he was in high school. And he was basically stopping a nuclear power plant going into Big Creek. He was a part of the group that was influencing Lane County. So that didn't happen. The resort didn't happen. We finally acquired it, 5 endangered species, and it's adjacent to a seabird protected area and the restoration project that you saw in the last photo. So we feel very pleased that we hung in there. There's a book out called Saving Big Creek by Andrea Scharf. And we're back again to Alsea Bay. And water is a big deal. It's a big deal for me. And I think I find myself here in front of you folks. I hate to blame my dad, but I think I have to, that he made me kind of think that you should be able to swim in your local river and catch fish out of your local river and not worry. And I think that, and I believe that. And now as an adult, I realize, oh, we've got the Clean Water Act and we have beneficial uses. You look at it, it's like right on, it's totally great. Okay, Clean Water Act. Does everybody know how it started? Why we have the Clean Water Act? Any head nods? Have you ever heard of the Cuyahoga River? Caught on fire, okay? Caught on fire before Clean Water Act was a glimmer in anybody's eye. It caught on fire and the federal government said, we need some rules. We can't just use all of our rivers as dumping sites. That was before, it was fine. We were doing things that were like, now we look at it, go, oh my gosh, folks were doing this kind of thing. Yes, they were doing these kind of things everywhere. Okay. So Clean Water Act came into play. And I, of course, totally am on board with that. Worked with, as this transition happened for me from working in the woods far away to working around here, I got to work with the Forest Service going, hey, we don't have any idea of what some of these systems have. Let's have a little project. Let's put out 100 hobo temps, basically the equivalent of a thermometer that you can put in the river, and you get your team together and say, okay, where do we go? Let's go to this system. Let's bracket this tributary main stem, and walk our way through and use put all those hobo temps in. They download data every 15 minutes or however fast you want to make it happen. And then it goes into the database and oh my gosh, it exceeds the the temperature thresholds for salmonids. You then give that information to DEQ. They update the list, and now it's water quality impaired, which means the agency has to write a TMDL, a total maximum daily load, a management plan to bring it into compliance so beneficial uses will work. The thing that drove home this for me so much was when I was doing rapid bioassessments, RBAs, with biosurveys. And it's a project where they, for me, it was like I get to put on a mask and snorkel and count fish every fifth hole and work my way of the system and go back and drink beers at night and then do it again tomorrow. And you work your way through a 500-mile project. So Steve and his crew, and I was a part of that crew, and biosurveys were working up in the Nehalem and all over. And it was like, yeah, I could do this. This is really an amazing data set. It shows you where the fish are, and they're probably linked to some ephemeral subsoil cold water area because the rest of the creek is too hot. And when I saw from my own eyes that a cutthroat is on its side spinning to stay alive, it couldn't avoid a predator. So it wasn't belly up temperature, but it was non-lethal. They couldn't avoid a predator and they couldn't feed. So that's a threshold. 62 is what it's supposed to be, and it was probably 74. And lethal would be like 82 or 84. They'd go totally belly up. But in any event, that really drove home this idea of, man, we need to plant trees. Fell right back into my camp of, yes, we could do this. We could work with the community, talk about these cold water refugias, talking about riparian zone. And so these are things that have evolved with myself, the Watershed Council, and the whole region. And we'll get to that as a reality check. And this 50-year document, anybody in the group here who's interested in some of the details, big picture. This is an analysis of all the states, and it's 50 years since that Cuyahoga River and the Clean Water Act came into play. The document's amazing. It's amazing, but it's also very sobering. But to me, it's a jobs program. And getting through denial is a big deal. Getting through the fact that we have problems is a big deal. So the challenges about dropping an Endangered Species Act to protect salmon was a big deal. The folks that says we have a problem and we've got to do something, first thing is let's get that information. Is it bad enough for it to be listed under the Endangered Species Act? Yes or no? Yes, it is. And that was way beyond me. I'm just a grunt that's out there going, we've got problems here, and interfacing with the folks who are writing petitions and things like that. So I went to DEQ and said, you know, I need a map. This is my second version of this, and I have it laminated, and I use that when I'm at the top of Cape Perpetua or I'm meeting with someone that I don't have access to a PowerPoint. So remember when I said the 303D list? So I said to him, I want a map that shows all the streams that are impaired, and I have another one that's in red, but this purple, I guess I would call that purple, right? Head nods, yes or no. Is that purple? All of those are impaired. So they're water quality impaired. So it's either temperature, dissolved oxygen, pH. There's about 13 different parameters. And if it exceeds a parameter, it goes on the list. Then DEQ has to write a management plan to bring it into compliance. So if you're on the Umpqua, if you're anywhere, you go, well, first thing is, oh, it's a beautiful, and it can look so beautiful. But the fact of it is, all indications are it's impaired. So as I continued down this road, asking questions and pulling up information, ESUs, you know about them or never? Never heard of them. An ESU. Okay, not enough head nods. Evolutionary significant units, ESUs. So salmon are in an ESU. And it has to do with, we're in the Central Coast there, and that is an ESU for coho. Okay, so it's a management tool to talk about the status of the system. But the salmon in Oregon, I think it's 17 ESUs are impaired. Oh, there they are right there. So you can see on the right, the dates of when those populations got listed under the Endangered Species Act. And that's when basically the funding and the organizing really kicked into gear. And the partnerships in some places kicked into gear, in some places it was in slow motion. But for us, we were running with it immediately because we had folks that were already engaged and considered it a priority. That was me. I was an instigator with a handful of people. And so the good news is that we stayed with it. And maybe we'll have time to look at a celebration document that we pulled together after 25 years. I'll give you a teaser on that. That volunteer I was telling you about before, I said, I need someone to chase down the funds. What kind of investments we've pulled off with these partnerships? Created the pie chart. So called Bobby Lindbergh. She's the person with ORI, which is Water Resource Inventory. Says, Paul, this is perfect timing. I just updated our database and we just crossed a new threshold. We've been at it so long. We just crossed $1 billion in Oregon trying to recover watershed and keep Oregon, Oregon. More than $1 billion. And I said, well, I want to look at our Central Coast. Pulled up all that data. Our fingerprints were over $110 million. I knew we were doing good, but that was just reinforcement of the fact that, yeah, we're doing it here on the, see the one down on the bottom there? Oregon coast, okay? That's just one ESU. But all of these are struggling with water quality, stream complexity, and issues. This is the southern end of our footprint. So I don't know how many of you have been out birding at the top of that or hung around on the deck at the lighthouse. It's pretty amazing. If you haven't done it, you should do it. And this, of course, is our town, Yachats. And off in the distance, you can actually see Cascade Head. That's that 1 million acre footprint that we deal with. Half of that 1 million acres, more or less, is the Sayuslo National Forest. The other half is private land, and you got state parks as well. And they're all partners. They all are a part of the team. And then as we talk about it on the terrestrial side, so I remember I mentioned a ridgetop to reef concept of working with people and dealing with seabirds, shorebirds as well. So these signages, we jump through all the hoops to get state parks in the city embracing creating these signage. And it's been really, really powerful to help with someone who's from Portland or Italy. You're standing at there, but this is interpretation from the top of the Cape at strategic locations on our footprints. And here's Chris, that's ODFW, and Steve, who's in the audience, he initiated the project of monitoring at 10 Mile Creek, and that's Evan. So some of these characters are partners, and some of them are visitors and partners who do sometimes they work for us on projects. I don't think we'll try and do the video, okay? But I should back up, see if we can back up, okay? But as this watershed restoration concept came into play, the science behind marine reserves floated across the Pacific from New Zealand to the West Coast and all over the world. The value of a no-take marine reserve. Some folks thought it was incredibly optimistic. It's not real. It's not really going to work in temperate waters. All those things came at us. And it's like, well, it makes sense if you don't catch them and they get bigger. That means they're very fecund and probably very good because you got to think about age structure. Okay, so that's the little video that we're not going to watch because of technology here. But the idea of a no-take marine reserve and a marine protected area floated to Oregon. I was also on the Ocean Policy Advisory Council, so I kind of ushered that into the discussions with Governor Kitzhaber and engaged with communities. And Kitzhaber said, okay, let's see what the communities say. Let's see what they say in the Central Coast. Let's see what they say up in the North Coast. So we helped organize communities, had these videos. We created 3 videos with Greenfire Productions. We used them as an introduction as phase 2 and phase 3 to bring folks understanding along. We'd always have these panels. Some of them were very heated and exciting and real. That's a mild way of saying it, right? I think so, especially in Coos Bay. But this is what we came out with. And so that's the 5 sites, not quite a network, which was our goal, but we have a system. And we are further along than some states and behind some states. California jumped forward with the Marine Life Protection Act and really mandated the concept of connectivity between the sites. And when we talk about marine reserves, marine protected areas, my role, of course, was to make sure we don't leave out other marine animals, including seabirds. And so out of this came this document. There's a size and spacing document and a number of policy things, but it really gives a litmus of where we wanted to go. And this was really challenging for us to have the scientists and folks like myself and some from the fleet, sport and commercial, kind of beating out a size and spacing policy recommendation. But it was definitely credible, and we've got something that is very usable, and this adaptive approach and representative habitat types, and all of that was work though. But here's what really, there's some of the key points. And I think most folks, I would venture to say, 90+%, probably even the upper 90s, have no clue that when you say, oh, honey, let's have some rockfish this weekend. Go to the store, go get some. Sounds great. $9.99 a pound, great. But then you go, I wonder what kind they are. Look at that age. Oh my gosh, canaries are 84 years. Yellow eye, 100, almost 120. Other ones, 200 years. POP, 100 years. We didn't know that before, but the folks on the other side of the bridge, actually, we're on that side here. Some of the folks that were at the Marine Science Center actually were some of the scientists that said, hey, we now have information capability of aging these fish. When I say an otolith, everybody knows what that is? Yes, correct. Okay, good. Okay, so they started to drop their jaw when all of this variable age structure came into play. Okay, quillback, that's a nearshore species, 90 years old. 90 years old. Okay, keep that thought. And here's the other one. Okay, the average number of young produced, this is one out of that whole list of rockfish, vermilion. Okay, if she's totally mature, she is producing, can you see above the fish's head how many, is that inches? Okay, I think it should have a number. Is it 1.7 million? 1.7 million offspring. Okay. So you put those two things together. Long-lived, very fecund if you let them grow. Okay. Back again to Coos Bay. This story is really a good story because it's true and it truly resonates to see so many folks in the room totally engaged as experts, fishermen. One guy stands up and says, I don't know what the problem is. I am catching so many lingcod. It is unbelievable. We don't have a problem. And I said, this is very interesting. This is good news. Let's talk about that. So I just go down the panel. It's a sporty, commercial, scientist, advocate. You go through the list. Well, what do you think of that? Well, what do you think of that? And everybody gave the take on it. And then got to the end. I said, Aaron, so what's a fully mature lingcod? So we can maximize that egg production that's going to go out into the water column. And he looks at the table, looks at the 4 of us that are at the table, about as big as this table. So what that gentleman was doing, he was catching one age class. That's good news to catch a bunch of these juveniles. But in fact, the big ones are the ones that are so productive that we want to protect a subset of them, okay? So that's the strategy that we need to think about, is precautionary strategies, connectivity strategies. We can do that if we choose. But it was very real. I mean, you could drop a pin when that discussion happened in the room. And everybody at Coos Bay at the meeting was, this is new territory to talk about fecundity and talk about age structure. And the fact that you can figure out a way, we can hire your crew to do the mapping and look at that home range of some of these species. All those rockfish are there. There's habitat types, just like our terrestrial side, that are going, well, they wouldn't be here. It's too sandy. Or yes, they would be here. And so then you can actually use that as a management tool. This is new territory that's just in our lifetime. Everybody's thinking about these things, about connecting core areas because they spill over. Have you heard of that phrase, spillover? Not everybody. Okay. It came to me the first time when someone says, well, have you heard about Cape Canaveral? I said, not really. He says, well, this had nothing to do with fish. It had to do with precautionary efforts for Cape Canaveral and the missile launches. So the Florida federal government put a big line, said nobody can go there. Nothing to do with fish. But the fleets, the fishermen found out that if you fish the edge, you will catch bigger fish. So the spillover of what's inside the no-take zone that had nothing to do with fish, they were catching fish because these fish would spill over. Record catches had nothing to do with conservation, but it works. So this is another, spillover, connectivity, all these things are really good things that were successful. And making sure that other shorebirds are part of this. So I get to be at the top of the Cape and use it as an educational site. I feel really fortunate. And I get to have partners. This gentleman worked on the MPA in the Gulf of Mexico, who was also a docent at Cape Perpetua. I feel really fortunate. And then the marine reserves, here's 3 of the bullets about it, about studying them around the world. And some consistent responses, increased biomass, diversity, size of fish within the marine reserve. A consistent response. And when PISCO, Partnerships for Interdisciplinary Studies of Coastal Ocean, I don't know if you've had any speakers here, but they have a document that's awesome, the Science of Marine Reserves. I just pulled this out of that. And if you see up in Oregon, when this was written, we had no marine reserves, marine protected areas. The next iteration, we are a part of this effort now, which is a worldwide strategy to protect marine biodiversity. I like that because it's actually linked to our statewide planning goals that you probably are not privy to. Statewide planning goal 19, yes or no? Protect marine biodiversity for current and future generations. It's one of my go-to statewide goals. How can anybody be against that? Protect marine biodiversity for current and future generations. Excellent goal. Okay, so we have a goal about that, but no marine reserves. Well, this marine reserves, marine protected area, if we do it right, we will have a management plan that can actually replicate the vision of protecting marine biodiversity for current and future generations. And so here's again, if you were an investor and you say, well, if we do this, you'll get from this angle, I can't really see. What's the biggest bar? Somebody yell out, what is that, 500% increase? What is it? 446. Okay, pretty good investment, huh? Especially when you know there's spillover, especially when you know that adult female is putting those larvae into the water column and they're settling out north and south depending on the current. And that bell curve of when they're spawning, the beginning, the middle, and the end. You got to think about those strategies as a manager going, oh, there's a reason why they're producing so many offspring. There's a reason why that is, because the odds are those larvae are going in and hitting a good ocean year if it's over a long period of time, as opposed to, okay, I'm spawning, boom, shot's over, it's done. But if you at the beginning, the middle, and the end, you have a chance of having a portion of your offspring hit the gold mine and survive really well because ocean productivity is strong. That's what it appears, this genetic strategy of having a long bell curve with very fecund adults. Does that make sense? Or did I go too fast? Just shake your head, yes or no. Okay. So here's our footprint. I organized some folks in Newport, or excuse me, in Yachts, and some folks in Florence, and we kind of came up with, well, the core key area is right around the rocky area where the Cape Perpetua is, and we had the ocean bathymetry, sandy bottom, and then we had a kind of somewhat of a negotiation with the fleet, talking about, yep, you guys can fish for crab in the water and the sand, but we think you should stay off of the prey base because we've got marbled murrelet listed and some significant seabird colonies. So we negotiated that and got I think we had one dissenting vote out of 15. So we got 20 miles of conservation with a core area in the middle. And the sea lion cave, so some of the ecological values, and boy, it's hard to read from this angle, but this idea of having a terrestrial strategy, working with the Forest Service, trying to recover 10 Mile Creek, Yachts River, Big Creek, and the two wildernesses. So a terrestrial conservation strategy and an ocean nearshore strategy. And sea land caves, special spot for another listed species. And of course, we have our visitors twice a year. So the ODFW science talks about 60 disjunct rocky patches, and our strategy is this ridgetop to reef concept. And then just as all of this was going on, and I was on the Habitat Committee, and I was also still working in the woods part-time with OSU, we found the first marbled murrelet nest, basically as the murrelet flies, from basically Yachts over the top into the Alsea Basin. So we found the first one in Oregon, and we started the agency, the SAUSLA, and Kim's crew, the OSU crew, started doing these monitoring strategies, looking at the best habitat and where the potential timber sales would go. And the detections, detection is circling and sub-canopy. Okay, so you're out there at 4:30 in the morning and you're at the strategic location and doing the survey and you get a detection. So following the protocol, if they're doing that behavior, that's home for them. Okay, they've got a nest someplace in there. Then I would get called and myself and my crew would go up and try and find the nest. So we had the highest detections. Craig Strong data says we had the highest detections in the near shore. So that's that near shore. They go down to 200 feet, and that's near shore isn't that deep, but they can go to 200 feet. And then they feed. They fly underwater to catch the prey. Okay. And then so we gathered all the data of the near shore use as well as the terrestrial use and gave it to BirdLife International. Okay, you see the globally significant IBA. I don't think I walked you through that yet, did I? Okay. Important bird area. We had nothing to do with setting that program up, but BirdLife International from London started it in the 80s and started saying, we should identify these important bird areas. So Oregon team, California team, all these states said, yeah, that makes total sense. You, Tom, could actually say, I know a spot that's special. Every time I go there, this is what I see. You can nominate it. And then a team would say, Tom, you're right. Let's put that to the list. We have 100 important bird areas around the state. Okay. A third of them are on the coast. Estuaries, boom, hits the target, meets all the criteria. Estuaries are important bird areas. Okay. And some of these other spots, of course, anybody who knows, Klamath Basin, Malheur, Finley, oh yes, 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 all these are important bird areas. All that is a name, but it gives you some standing related to conservation measures and outreach and education. So we've got 100. Other states have bought into it, other states have not. Other countries have bought into it, other states, countries have not, because it's a voluntary measure. So for us, we embraced it. So we gave the data to them and they says, well, we've got 3 designations, Paul, you know. One is an important bird area, which is significant. Oh, it's a hemispheric important bird area. That's good news. Or globally significant. Basically, bing, you hit the bell, which means you've got something that you can really say that's special. Okay. So globally significant marbled murrelet IBA. Hit the ringer. So trying to acquire land fits well. And this was one of the first nests we found. If you look close, and we can't tell you if that's a sand lance or not. Maybe someone in this room could. We could not. But if you look close, do you see the fur there? The chick? Okay, she, in the actual footage, she gets fed that sand lance. I'll just call it sand lance. And we watch her chug it down. It's spectacular. It's on an OPB footage. And these are the trees that they nest in, the upper canopy. The average nest is about 175 feet. And so I'm fortunate enough to get students of all ages, OSU, U of O, and other activists out into the field and at the top of the Cape. We have a oyster catcher project, or an albatross, or other seabird projects. So when we, so that's 2004, when we were looking at this IBA designation, folks contacted Ainley and the folks related to the Pacific Seabird Group and says, hey, we're putting this map together. And they immediately go, this is a great idea. It's not connected to an estuary. It's not connected to a wetlands reserve, a wildlife reserve. But we've got some hot spots that are in the ocean. And if you talk to someone from the commercial fleet, they go, oh, yeah, we see albatross here. We see this there, you know. And so all of a sudden, folks go, you should be drawing circles around these spots that are significantly, consistently identified for seabirds. Okay. So, see that Cedar Banks, Stonewall, that complex. Okay. So that was identified by the specialist. Everybody kind of says, yes, this is clearly a hotspot for seabirds. Okay. So then that went into this process. We've got some funding to raise awareness about these hotspots that are in the ocean, not associated to, like again, a refuge, a estuary, hotspots consistently in the ocean. I'll show you this one map, but I've got it. We're not going to be able to see it, but I'll have it over here for folks that want to look at it. I think it's one of the best maps we put together. But so we've got marine important bird areas. But this is the map that we put together. And you realize everybody's jaw kind of dropped when we realized that folks will come from the South Pacific to feed consistently right here in the California current every year. Whether it's Astoria Canyon or Aceta Perpetua Complex or down around Coos Bay. These are in the ocean hotspots. And species are coming from Chile, the South Pacific, all over, consistently back to the same spot. You're looking for a good book, Eye of the Albatross by Dr. Carl Safina. Here's another good article that was in Natural History.
Paul, just a little time check. You got about 2 minutes.
2 minutes. Oh my gosh. Okay, we identified 200 locations, 33 million birds, 150 species, B2B strategy. So this is us out in the field. These are partners, field trips. Marbled Murrelet, in the middle of that, pushing for an uplisting from a threatened to an endangered status. Then we would get a recovery plan and survival guidelines. We did. So here's that map about birds per kilometer. You can see the Central Coast there. That's us. We're the highest concentration. And I will show you the first one. Go from the base of the tree, which is not the base of the tree. I'm in an adjacent tree about 100 feet away, and then go up that tree to the top. You see one branch heading to the left. Look to the right. You see a little window. Can you see the window? Can you see the adult in that window? Yes or no? Okay. Yeah. So in any event, this is what we're looking for. That's why it's hard to see on the ground. That's why they had to hire folks like ourselves, climbers. And that's what, after she's done pledging, you go and measure, get data on the nest platform. These are some of the volunteers, projects. This is a partnership with Forest Service, identifying road decommissioning and acquisition. Here's that Big Creek acquisition. Saving Big Creek is the book. And as a result of it coming into state park lands, partnership with the Watershed Council, we did a big project there. And when you're doing a project in stream, you go right up the food chain up to benefits all of these species. That trap on the right is the research project at ODFW, was run for, well, since the early 90s. And this is what gets caught in the small trap, a percentage of all the outmigrants. So it's a data set. And this is the good news. That's the graph of, is it working? I look like it is to me. And that's part of the project. And Ulicon's another whole story. And I didn't get to beaver. I've got to get to beaver or my friend will chew on me. Prey base. 2 minutes going fast. These haven't changed in millions of years. But here's beaver, and those are all the benefits that are there. And so we're attempting to influence policy and management of beavers as a keystone species. At this point, ODFW hasn't embraced that change in policy. I believe they will, because there's a new document that's out related to the benefits as a keystone species. An excellent document. Anybody that's interested in that, let me know, and we can get you into the queue for understanding more of the details. But you got to think about what we need is robust populations at a landscape scale. Salmon benefits, water quality, water quantity benefits, as well as the species lists that have recovery plans that identify beaver as helping them recover. So all of these benefits are clear. It's not a question mark. And it's time to deal with that. We're not the only ones. These are two different states that are dealing with the same issue of how do we live with beaver and increase beaver production, survival. Again, and it's millions of dollars are being spent, and this animal will help with us for free. You're going to have to jerk my chain or I'll keep doing it.
Now.
There's a beaver pond. Oh, I've got to get these 2 slides in for my friend in Eastern Oregon. Okay, this is when there's no beaver dams, and you can see the burn goes right up to the stream. Here's what happens when there are beaver dams. It's refugia. And so everything about it is again, even if you're on the dry side, they've got all of these benefits. And the only thing that we can really control is us killing them. They will get hit by cars. They will get eaten by cougars. But we should quit killing them and let them multiply so we can have more salmon and help recover multiple species. It's a natural climate solution. Okay.
All right. So I know that we ran a little bit over, so if anybody needs to exit, you can go ahead and go out the back door out this way. For folks online, if you need to drop off, that's okay. But if you are all willing, for those that want to stick around, can we do maybe 5 minutes of questions?
I had a cup of coffee before this, so I'm just totally ready for anything.
All right, so I'm going to open it up for questions, and it looks like we have a question online, so go ahead, Roseanne.
Salmon life histories are complicated, from river to estuary to ocean and back to river. Many possibilities for weak links in the system. That said, what do we know about the effects of coho restoration efforts on the Oregon coast during the past 25 years?
Okay, is Steve still here? He just, okay. There was an expert in this room that could answer that perfectly. I mean, I can take my shot on it, is that when our watersheds are on the 303D list, water quality impaired, we can do a project that will improve water quality. When our streams are on are down to bedrock, and we identify it through an limiting factor analysis, you can do a project to slow that gravel down and create spawning habitat. We know how to do that too. You've got to have big sticks, big trees, create the jam, and that habitat gets improved for spawning. So there's life history patterns, or what are the problems? That's in the LFA, limiting factor analysis, that will point us in a direction that this is what we need to do here, okay? And so there's a list of things that we can do that we know work, and there are papers that are out there. And this large wood placement with helicopters, and I say large wood, these are trees that are about 150 feet long, and they're helicoptered into place to sort gravel and create complexity.
All right. I think what we're actually going to do, Roseanne, is there any other questions online? Okay. For everybody that's here in the room, I think the more efficient way for us to do that is for you to come up and ask Paul your question. And for everybody online, we're going to go ahead and wrap up this session. And again, thank you everybody for being here, and come back in the new year and we'll kick off our seminar series. But before I let this go, one more round of applause for. All right, everyone, if you have questions, come up and see them. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah. Hey, Tom, how you doing? Nice.
History lesson.
Yeah. Yeah. How you doing?
Good.
Hey,
Nice job.
you've been on my list for good. Good news.
Well, that's glad to hear it.
Yeah, yeah. I heard that the bio-window creators for the near shore, they've gonna establish those, right? Or have they?
Bio indicators.
For water quality,
Oh.
because we got a lot of spots in the near shore
Yeah.
that are impaired.
So, I don't think that they have been quantified as such.
Okay.
That may be that I'm just not
Savvy
in
to it.
that loop. It's
Yeah.
possible.
And it might be that
That
it's
happens.
premature.
But, certainly there is some level of monitoring that's going on. But a lot of it is related to, some of it's OAH stuff